Welcome to Jobs in Tech. Welcome to Jobs in Tech. What's going on in the world today, Brad? In this beautiful, techie, geeky, crazy world we live in, what's happening?
You know better than I do. I don't know. I'm just here helping you out now.
Yeah.
You're helping me out. No, I'm actually excited about today's show. We actually have a guest, which is what we have been doing recently. We have Robert Turner of CommSys, and I'm really excited about this episode. I'm excited to learn about him, learn all about CommSys, and all the cool, innovative things they're doing.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Robert, how you doing, sir?
How you doing,
I'm
Robert?
doing great. I'm doing great. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm in the office today, which is a minor miracle in itself, but it's a good day. So,
It's
That's awesome,
so funny. That's our thing now. It's like, office.
right?
Who does that? Gosh, that's
Why
old.
go there,
That's old school.
right?
well, it's better than being sitting in an airplane across the country like I've been doing most of this year. So
Oh,
I'll take being in my own office and sleeping in my own bed. I mean,
oh,
certain basic creature comforts, like sleeping in your own bed at night, is a good thing.
There is a lot to be said for that. I get
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, so true, so true. So
So
cool.
cool, Robert. Why
Go
don't you
ahead.
tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us, a little bit about your background. Tell us about CommSys.
Conversations.
Help us understand a little bit more about you.
Okay. My name's Robert Turner or Bob Turner, whichever you prefer. I have been in the tech industry. I'll let's put it this way: I've been programming since I was 12 years old. I'll just leave it as that was a little later, the very late 70s. But it kind of gives you a
Wow.
long how long I've been slinging code around. I don't do much now. They've got me being president and founder, chief salesman, and chief technologist out there, which are all incredibly important, but it's hard to get away from slinging code sometimes. But anyways, um, along the way, I ended up with an engineering degree, electrical engineering, which is probably my first passion, and then I ended up getting the university somehow to pay for my master's degree in computer science. So I've got both sides of that, and it's a good thing. But along the way, I kind of also dabbled a lot in public safety, and that became really important when I was in high school because I found I didn't quite get along with a lot of the people at my high school. I kind of fell into being a firefighter, and it was really next door neighbor was a captain with our fire company, and he's a big believer that teenage boys with idle hands is a really bad idea for the universe. And I had the thing back in that era of computers were very expensive and I couldn't afford one, so I became a firefighter instead. I go figure that one out, but that was good. That was a great experience that I didn't realize at the time would end up moving my life in a really important direction because passionately between my technology side and my public safety side, that's basically what defines me. Those are the two things that are important. And I did the firefighting for about 4 years. I also became a summer relief dispatcher as well, and this was all in southern New Jersey. Protect the agency so they don't have to admit that I actually was there. But I did that and ended up in college for Ohio, and I've been in Ohio for a long time since then. Ended up marrying a wonderful woman and raising a couple kids, and she wouldn't let me be a firefighter anymore because she was always afraid of getting the phone call of your husband's died. So it's okay, whatever. But because of that, I ended up getting back in the technology business in, of all things, public safety. And I ended up starting a company about 30 years ago, and that company is CommSys. And we have evolved into becoming very specialized in law enforcement and public safety software, which is a really niche business. And it's been where I've been passionate for these 30 years doing that type of stuff. And for me, it's always been important of, I enjoy being a firefighter, but ultimately in the end, a lot of people I know, and the people who on both the technology side as well as the public safety side that are involved in this space, we do it because we feel like we're helping people. And there are things that I know that have saved people's lives. That's ultimately the big motivator for me. I know, unlike a lot of people, and I know, no offense to anybody working for a bank or doing financial applications, moving numbers around, it's important. But I'm sorry, doing what I do in terms of saving people's lives and officers' lives, that's really important to me. That's what gets me going in the day. So, you
100%
know,
agree. That's
yeah,
awesome.
And then that's what's really been my main motivator in life. And I've been very fortunate, because of both being gifted, through God or whatever else, with a lot of, very good technology skills and an ability to communicate technology ideas, plus having been a public safety guy, that I've been one of the leaders in technology within law enforcement and public safety. And that's, I can't be any luckier than that. So I've been a really lucky guy. So that's kind of the big background on me. That work for you guys in terms of
No,
understanding
absolutely.
who I
I,
am?
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think you summed it up, really well. I mean, it seems like you kind of went full circle. You were doing the firefighting, and then you went to technology, and you still have that passion, and that's awesome. That's really cool.
The other cool thing I love about the way you told your story and where you went, it's cool. We talk about finding our passion and being in our passion, and you could tell by listening to you that you're in your passion.
Oh, absolutely.
Hands down,
Absolutely.
you love what you do, and that's cool. I love to hear that from folks. That means you care about your company, you care about what's going on, and I love that. I just love that's who you are.
Absolutely.
Well, I drive my wife up the wall, because whenever I hear a siren or something like that, that goes up and look at, okay, what the hell's that moving? Where are they going? Who's responding? Well, I know everybody in the local agencies around here. I drive her up the wall, but yeah, you're right. It is my passion. It's what I've done, and what I've absolutely been blessed to be able to do during my career.
That's
So,
cool.
And that's awesome. I mean, that's what you really want. I mean,
mm,
through life, I mean, you just want to find your passion in life, whether that be technology, whether that be firefighting, whether that be playing guitar, whatever. You just want to have that passion.
yep,
Yeah.
you got it. And it's amazing how everybody's passions are different, and this is what's worked for me, and I'm a very happy guy.
So
That's awesome.
we always like to kind of ask, so what would you say if we were saying, how is your company a disruptor for technology? What would you say to that?
I would say we did the disruption a while ago. Let me kind of give you a little bit of background with this. A lot of people talk about being on the bleeding edge of technology. One thing by working in public safety is I found the trailing edge of technology here. And we deal with a lot of old technologies. So when let me kind of go a little bit more into myself for a second. Am I motivated by money? Yeah, as much as the next guy. To me, money's important for a retirement. I want a comfortable retirement and things like that. But I never did it purely for the money. I did it for the autonomy. Okay. I mean, people go, what the hell are you talking about autonomy? I just don't suffer fools well. I've never suffered fools well. And I am very much of a case of I would rather work for myself 1,000,000 hours a week and know it's for myself rather than we're working for somebody else at a big company where I'm in the cube dying slowly
Right.
as my life drains out for me. And I had there were some things while I was in college. I worked for some large name brand companies, which I'm going to, protect from this. And, it's a long, long time ago. But I learned some things about myself is one, is I don't suffer fools well. And two, you know what? I like the autonomy of being able to do what I want to do rather than what I necessarily have to. Now, I found out life is a little bit different than that ideal, but there's still a lot of truth in it. That's really why I was motivated to start my own company out of college. Got through graduate school, dealt with all the politics of universities, and said, you know what, let's go ahead and go start our own shop. We're not making any money right now as it is. Let's see what we can do. And I've been successful. And, I've lost money, I've made money, but I've been doing it for 3 decades. That's just pretty impressive. I'm pretty proud of myself in that regard. But to get to your point, we didn't go start within public safety initially. Initially, I was a Unix and TCP/IP hacker in the mid to late '80s, right at the
Okay.
beginning of the epoch, and so I was doing stuff on an IT services basis. And as we grew the company where we are based right now in Dayton, Ohio, and CommSys' office is in Dayton, Ohio, and Phoenix, Arizona. And in Dayton, we got started here because that's where I went to university. And it's a really is a great tech hub. It was even a bigger one years ago. We had companies like NCR were based here. We had LexisNexis was based here really up until the last 5 years when they finally moved the rest of the stuff out. In fact, I can look at the old LexisNexis data center just outside my window here. And then we have this small place called Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, because you may have heard of two guys from Dayton. Wright brothers, they kind of invited this thing called
Yeah.
interplane.
Have no
Yeah,
idea who they
and they
are.
had no idea. Well, Wright-Patterson's really important for the Air Force because a lot of their program management offices and system program offices are all run here. So if you go on I-675 out here, it's, as they call the Beltway Bandits, but there's an awful lot of software people around this area that are supporting Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the defense mission in this country. So there's a lot of technology around here. And as a result, when I got out of graduate school, there was a need for people doing Unix workstations for engineering and technology purposes. And we got started doing services, which was great. And then along the line, we did that for about 7 years. And during the same time I was doing public safety work, I kind of backdoored into that. Too much of a story right now, but we started doing some contract work for people in the computer-aided dispatch, or what we call CAD. So yeah, you get careful. Oh, the CAD's computer-aided design, not in my world. It's computer-aided dispatch and police records management, or RMS. So yeah, CAD and RMS will be two terms you hear me talk probably every 10 minutes in the business, because those people are really who we do business. And what a CAD system is in terms of a dispatch system is that's the system that when you call 911 up and you're talking to a dispatcher, or what we call a call taker, that person's taking that information and entering it into a CAD system, because that's how they actually manage dispatching a unit to you and tracking what that unit's doing. So if they're overdue or they haven't responded in a while, they know they might have an emergency. They're also tracking it for legal purposes. If you go into court and say, okay, well, when did the police really respond? That'll usually be a printout out of the CAD system that has it. But basically a CAD is, the way terms I've always used, is a practical support system for law enforcement or public safety in terms of managing their calls for service. That calls for service is an important term. Records management, that's where, one of the things that you deal with police, everything they do gets documented. Well, everything that gets documented needs to be stored and searchable, and that's what a records management system does in very short form, and what's doing it. So what does CommSys do in this whole mess? Well, when you're dealing with law enforcement, every time if you're an officer, and I use the famed officer pulling somebody up on the side of the street for a ticket, which I'm sure has never happened to you guys in your life.
Never, ever, ever.
Never happened at all. And, when that happens,
knock on the
yeah, well, the short form version is when they pull up on you, they already run your information. But let's go to the kind of longer form version. When the officer stops you, finds there's nothing really going on, they take your driver's license, your vehicle registration, in some states your insurance, back to the cruiser. And maybe they're going to give you a prize. Maybe they just want to look at who you are. And when they actually run your information, they're running that on their computer, which is generally talked to their CAD system, which then in turn talks to the state crime computer. Okay. And that state crime computer is usually tied to the state DMV system. It also is tied to what we call, and in the business called, the state hot files. And those hot files are the wanted vehicles, the wanted people, and things like that based on state information. They'll also tie to the FBI's NCIC system, National Crime Information Center, in Clarksburg, West Virginia, where they're looking for felony warrants on you as an individual, or your information on your vehicle if it's wanted out of state. And then, part of the DMV check is making sure your driver's license is valid and your registration is valid. So those are all really important things. These state crime computers, I used kind of the older name. The name now, we really call them state CJIS systems, or Criminal Justice Information Systems, CJIS. And we say
that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. And every state's got a CJIS system. The problem, the way you talk to it varies in all 50 states. Okay. And then you have states like California and Ohio and a couple other ones that have regional systems, may have more than that. And then there's also federal systems, like the FBI has its systems, but then the Secret Service has its systems. And they're all networked together into a giant network that they all share information with each other. But it's all message based. because
Oh wow.
yeah, and this is where usually I'll usually get a good what are you talking about answer when I say this. The reality is the law enforcement information sharing environment that I just described is some of the oldest information sharing of anybody in the world of any application, and it dates back to the 1930s. At which point I'm about to hear, but wait, there weren't computers in the 1930s. No, there weren't, but there were teletypes. And what you ran into is the
Makes sense.
1930s, after you got past Wall Street, the news industry, and something else, I can't remember off the top of my head, the next biggest user of teletypes in the world were the police. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because the problem they are dealing with, and I don't know how many of your listeners has ever had to deal with it, but if you're going to arrest somebody on a warrant that's from out of state, let's say I'm in Ohio right now, and next door is Indiana. Let's say I'm an Ohio cop, and I stop somebody on the street that turns out they have a warrant out of Indianapolis, or Marion County more correctly, that needs to be arrested. Well, I need to look at those documents and look at that information. In the old days, the way that was dealt with, literally, and I have really read the accounts of this, is that you'd have two officers on telephone lines, and one would be dictating the warrant to the other, and the receiving guy would sign off on it that this was the true and accurate information that he received in a phone call. Well, that's what
Wow.
they did in the 1910s, as late as that. And so when teletypes came along, that changed the world, because now they could do, and I can imagine they were cutting and pasting teletype paper tape together to get that out, but they could now transmit a warrant that was presentable in court, and all the receiving officer had to do was sign it. And you can see how law enforcement went to teletype technology big. And so the point is, in the mid 30s, you had the state police of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York link themselves together so that they could share information in real time between each other, which was a big deal for that time. And that's where the CGIS networks really came from, was growing that out over, from the 30s to the 60s, where we then brought the first computers along. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI. He realized that it was important, and he brought what would become NCIC, National Crime Information Center, and took the teletype network and plugged it into the back of a mainframe, and that's how you got the first CGIS network. And states like California started to do things early as well, and now every state has one of these systems. The problem is, and the great part there, they're all there, but the signaling varies in all 50 states. So the
So there's no
problem
standard.
is,
Talking
yeah,
back and forth to each other.
exactly.
Yep.
So they all talk to each other because they all did the work that way. But let's say I'm a company like, Motorola is fine because they're one of my partner companies. They're trying to sell in 50 states. I think actually they try to sell in less, but they're trying to sell across state lines. And the problem is they've got to deal with every one of these state systems. Well, rather than reinvent the wheel and try to do it themselves, they use our stuff, and our Connect CIC product is our universal middleware. So I like to call it the Star Trek Universal Translator for state CGIS systems. You write to our API once, we translate it for what you need to do. There's some limitations, but overall that's what we do, and we're in 48 of the 50 states. And when we have a bunch of counties in California, because California is a little different. We have some federal agencies that we deal with as well. So we're really out there, and we have probably close to 2,000 installations out there
That's awesome.
overall. We support about 60 to 70% of the CAD and RMS industry, and we're very, very busy in the business, and we're very blessed to be able to do what we do. We also have other products. We all lump them under the category of CGIS Access. It's either our message router, which I just talked about, or our terminal product that we use for providing access and basically forms that then generate messages to go to those systems. So within the community, we're very well known in what we do. It's a very niche business. It's not the type of thing that you're going to do it. But why we were innovative is nobody had ever done this before. In fact, an ex-CEO friend of mine, about 10 years ago, we were at a essentially a trade association meeting. People would curl their hair if I heard me saying that. But the organization we belong to, he was introducing me to a very important person in the industry. He said, Bob's done something amazing. He created a market segment that didn't exist in this business, and went on to explain what I had just explained to you. And that was really what the innovative piece
That's
and then
awesome.
we drove the cost out of that part of the business, which has always been something that everybody hated doing, but everybody needed to do it. And so we do it better.
That's awesome.
Cool.
So help me understand. How do you guys take care of the technology? I mean, do you guys employ like in house? Do you guys use contractors?
We
Help me understand.
primarily use in-house people because
Okay.
of what we do. We got to do a lot of background checks. We're dealing
Right,
with a
which is what I
lot of what
assumed. Yeah.
exactly. We're dealing with what is called sensitive but unclassified, or SBU. Okay, and that's criminal justice in general in this country. One of the things is, unlike the defense stuff, which can have classifications, top secret tickets and secure compartmentalization and all the different tickets that can go with it. Criminal justice cannot really be classified in any way, shape, or form. The only thing you can do is with an active investigation, you can keep the files closed on that on particular crime. Otherwise, everything else has to be shared, because one of the important points of the Constitution when the country was founded, founding fathers were very concerned that you know what the hell was going on in criminal justice. If you have been arrested, you should know why you've been arrested, which was a problem under the prior management of the country. So as a result, we do background checks, because you got an extensive criminal history, you're not going to work here. If you have a ticket, yeah, you might even have a mistake where you were an idiot when you were in college. That's okay too. We can get through that. But you do a trust crime, like you embezzled from the church, collection thing, not going to happen. We're not going
That's
to
a
have
little
that.
different.
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah, exactly.
So
So yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, I was just
No,
going to ask. So, what would you say kind of stands out in your company, like for people that want to work there? What would you say stands out? The culture? What would you say stands out?
I think it's a culture. We have a tight culture. Most of our people have been here for many years. I've got, a number of employees that have been here 15, 20 years, because ultimately in the end, a lot of us get very passionate about the work we do. It's got to be something you want to do. There's some people, we've interviewed people, and they come in, I guess, not really understanding what we do. We start talking about what we do, and we literally had somebody say, this just isn't going to be me. I just can't really be helping the police. Okay, that's fine.
Oh, wow. Like that
I'm
makes
not
sense.
going to
That's
argue with you.
interesting.
Yeah, that's your prerogative, and certainly we understand that. And just don't badmouth us, and we'll be fine. And that's what happens. But a lot of people, once they begin to realize what we do and how we affect officers, and this really gets down to the core of what happened with me. Back about 25 years ago, when I was still slinging a lot of code, and I was like one of two programmers in the company, I had to go off and actually. I was at a site in California, and the sergeant I was working with, who's now become actually a good friend, he's long retired, and he and I still keep in touch, said, "Hey, if you're going to be doing this for me, you need to understand California law enforcement, because it's a little different out here," which he's right. And he said, "I want you to go on ride-alongs." So he stuck me on some ride-alongs on Fridays and Saturday nights, made me stay over, and I was
Fridays.
riding one night with one of the officers, and he had a laptop in there, and I was just basically there as an observer, which you're supposed to be doing. Although we were having a good time chatting, because we were about the same age and same lot in life and things like that. It was about 2 in the morning, and all of a sudden he saw something, a guy driving away, he didn't like. And so he radioed in to dispatch saying, "We're going to make a traffic stop on this road, this plate, blah, blah, blah." And dispatcher ran it and came back and said, "We've got a felony warrant on the owner of that vehicle. You approach with caution." And he's radioing back, "Do we have anything else?" "No, we don't. This is all we got. And we got the vehicles involved, and the owner is potentially involved as well." And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he said, "Well, this is going to be a rough one." He said, he gave me the usual instructions: if shooting starts, you take the car and get the hell out of here. That's a fairly typical thing that
Right.
would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was one of those moments where all of a sudden it got really tense. He got out of the cruiser. He's got the alley lights focused forward. He's is yelling at the occupant, stick your hands out of the cruiser. We're waiting for backup to come on. And eventually they did get the individual out. They did arrest him. He had an in-state warrant, and it was for a violent crime. I don't remember what it was. It was a long time ago. It doesn't really matter. But it was at that moment that I began to realize that information systems have a life and death impact on it. Because imagine if he had walked up to that cruiser or walked up from the cruiser to that vehicle, not knowing that that was a wanted felon in the vehicle for a violent crime, and that guy had a gun and went ahead and shot the officer. That's happened many times before. I
Absolutely, yeah, it
get
has.
a feed of people who are Leoka and things like that. So it was a real thing that changed my outlook on things and made me extremely passionate about dealing with the CGIS data. So that's where a lot of our people bringing it back to the candidates that way. If you realize how important it is to helping law enforcement and helping save lives of both people in the people who are citizens as well as law enforcement, you'll be able to do a good job here.
So help me understand. I mean, that's awesome because I think you're right. I mean, having the understanding and the foresight to know how important that is and how to handle situations is very critical. But with having said that, when since this is such a critical thing that you guys take care of, what sort of tech skills are you looking for from candidates? Help me understand what you guys like your tech stack. What skills matter most to you?
Okay. A lot of our stuff is, fairly old, although we're moving we got a lot of C++ around because we're moving messages. We're close to the operating system. We're dealing with a lot of networking and low level stuff. So we've got a number of guys who are low level sockets programmers that we're doing bits and bytes on the wire type program. That's not all of our people. We got some web people too. We do a lot of PHP work and, SQL access as well. And we're starting to move into some newer technologies as well. Newer for us, it may be older for other people that way. We're trying to move into some OAuth and things along that line where we're taking our technologies and intelligently moving them forward. And the reason I say intelligently is that there's a kind of an accepted premise in our business that the software doesn't necessarily have to be the prettiest, but it better be as reliable as hell. Okay. And that's what
Absolutely.
people are looking for. They can sacrifice pretty for rock solid, and that's been one of our design considerations over the years. Why we probably laid back a little more than we should, but we wanted to make sure that we always had something reliable. We don't need, to use old terms, a blue screen of death type situation. Not that we have that anymore,
Right.
but the point of an application crash is just not acceptable in any situation. We've got to be up and running 24/7, probably for years at a time. And we know we have sites where our software has literally been running for years at a time because of that. So, we're, a lot of, like I said, a lot of PHP and a lot of newer things around that realm. And we're starting to experiment with some other ideas as well. But at the end of the day, very much, very
Okay.
good, just core solid technologies.
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Okay. I'm just curious. What do you look for specifically in a candidate? You
Um,
specifically. What do you look for? What
we're
are you
look
thinking?
we're looking for somebody who's really interested in learning deep hard stuff. Okay, when you have to
Cool.
dig through a manual that was probably written in the late 1990s, but it's still the way you communicate with a county switch in or county message switch or a county CGIS system in California. That's what you have to deal with. So you've got to be prepared to work off documentation, and then in many situations we will have weird stuff happen, and a lot of times it's about, okay, could I have ended up here bending on the other system? Because remember, we're dealing with communications. Our programs are communicating with other systems. And sometimes when things go wrong, it's not our fault. It's the other systems doing something wrong. And you've got to be smart about saying, okay, what are they doing wrong? How do I program defensively? How do I make sure that we don't get taken down by the other system? So you've got to have very much a thought process of thinking, okay, I have to worry about my stuff, but I also have to worry about the other guy's stuff that I don't control.
Right. And you need to understand the integrations and potentially any flaws, like you said. That makes complete sense. So,
And being aware of workflow is really important. One of my favorite things to bitch about is, and this is a great thing, I'll just use as an example. One of the ways that we have a very distinct language in public safety and law enforcement, and you got to learn that language. So you may never be a cop or a firefighter, but you better understand the
the
language. So,
lingo.
for example, yeah, it's really important because it means things. People say, "Oh, we got a warrant out in the car." Face palm. There's no such thing as a warrant on a car. You only have a warrant on a human being. You can have a want on a vehicle, but you only have warrants on human beings because that's the way it works. That's just an example one, but that's classically one that we use. And the problem is you've got to use the language right, because if you're talking to a customer on the other end who's the lieutenant over support services or a records clerk, she runs the records section, and you use the wrong terminology, you immediately cut your credibility out from under you, and they're never going to treat you as a peer. And that's probably one of the more important things. So you've got to be comfortable learning a new language entirely too.
So how would you help somebody that's new to your company adapt to that lingo? I mean, help me. That sounds interesting.
We will put people on ride-alongs. We have agencies
Okay.
around the area that I know, the chiefs or command staff, and if somebody wants to do a ride-along, hey, they'll go ahead and they'll go off and do some ride-alongs. And I think it's a growth experience for a lot of people. I think they begin to understand. We also have some people who said, "I'd never want to do that again." I'm glad we're doing what we're doing, but not for me. Hey, that's
Right.
fine too.
Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, and as you've alluded to, I think that provides so much more context when you're actually seeing what's actually going on firsthand. That experience is worth more than gold in that situation, and it puts it all together for them.
Yep, no, exactly right. It makes, sometimes software can get awful abstract. When all of a
Right.
sudden you're actually seeing how they're using it and how that affects people's lives, it makes it really tangible.
Absolutely. It brings it closer to home.
Yeah.
Cool. So
Awesome.
what I know we kind of talked about culture already, but help me understand. Like, what is the culture like there? How is that?
Yeah, we've got about 20 people. We've got probably like 15 are all in the office here. Another 5 are remote doing various things out in the hinterlands. So we have a fairly tight group. We have a core group of about 4 developers that do a lot of the development work, and we could have 4 more if we wanted to. We just trying to find the right people and the right mix for that is difficult. And then we have a number of customer support people, because these people are hardcore technical support people. You've got to be able to work with agencies and figure out what's going wrong and what isn't
What works?
working. And that might be talking to the state crime computer. It may be talking to one of our CAD or RMS partners. It might be talking to an end user. And there's a lot of detective work of figuring out what the heck is going on. So we've got a mix of a lot of very good technical support people and some very good developers. And like I said, I got 4 right now. We could use 8. We could afford it right now if we can find the right candidates.
That's awesome.
With that said, what's the interview process look like? What happens when somebody gets together?
Generally, we do a 2 to 3 stage process. Essentially, my COO, who runs the development side of the shop, he ends up usually doing the first past interviews, and he's managed some of the largest development shops in the public safety business. He ran one of the biggest, which had 300 programmers in it at that point.
Wow.
He and I have been friends for many years, and about 7 years ago, when a company got acquired, he was left on the outside of it, and we'd always wanted to work together. And I needed somebody who was a professional manager, much more so than I myself. I am not the world's best manager of people, but he really is. He's got skill sets that I don't have. But then again, I'm a bootstrapper. I can create something out of nothing, which he just can't do. And it's just different things. And we were able to come together where, he got some interest in ownership and, value of the company. So it's worked out well for us. But to your point about interview, he usually does the first stage interview, and then he will then, depending on what he sees in terms of the candidate, will then pull together, usually our lead developer, our lead support person, and usually somebody else to go ahead and do another interview. And then if we really get hot on somebody, we'll probably asking to come visit, because there's nothing quite like an in-person interview to really get a handle on what people are about and if they're truly comfortable about it. And yeah, that's generally what the process is. We don't want to be difficult. We don't want to have a long, drawn-out process. You're going to know pretty much all the way along whether we're interested in you or not, or whether you got the right sets. We're pretty transparent that way. We don't tend to, play any games that way.
Right.
It's just not
Well,
who we are.
well, and I think that's key too, because I mean, when you're going through the interview process, I'm a firm believer you're going to know fairly quickly if that person is going to be a good fit for your company. So why string somebody along? If you know that you can be transparent, hey, let's be transparent. Let's get the feedback. Let's help them out and help you out as well by not wasting time,
Yeah.
essentially.
No, and that's exactly right. And that's, generally Scott knows very quickly during the first interview what he wants to go to the second round. We get to the second round. Now we're looking for that being a two-way street interview. We
Right.
want to have you've done a little research on us. You should be asking good questions about your technology, some of the things you and I have already talked about, but also understanding, hey, where does this fit in the relative stack of, what we're doing, a little bit more on the detailed level. Why are we dealing with technology that looks like it came out of the teletype era? Well, part of it is some states are still living in the teletype era. We are
Right.
okay with that. Other states are XML. That's fine. We can deal with all those things. And so, second interview is usually the critical one, because if we get through the second one, which usually is with our people, then we have the third one. That's usually the in-person.
Okay. Nice.
Hmm.
I'm curious. I'm going to throw this question out here. How is it dealing with the state of Utah and their systems? I mean, are we cutting edge? Are we up to date?
You're a lot better than they were about 10 years ago. I know I've met the staff a number of times on some activities. We have a mixed amount of business in Utah, not a lot. There's some incumbent vendors that have done a lot of work there, but we have done something. They had a big changeover in terms of personnel. I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, and I think it's been a breath of fresh air. So they're in pretty good shape now. I've been really impressed when I've talked to them. I've got some other side things that were part of the business that we're working in, and wanted to make sure that they could handle it. And they said, yeah, just when you actually get somebody who wants to do that, let us know. We'll be ready to move forward with that. And I can talk about that in a little while. It's kind of one of the more
Awesome.
interesting things we're doing.
Cool.
I don't know if this is a thing too. Is there any states that you'd prefer not to work with? Kind of putting you on the spot here. I wouldn't even go that route. Let's just say.
No, let's just say there are some that are easy and there are some that are difficult. Some of them, invent bureaucracy, and I'm not going to mention who they are.
Right.
And, the funny thing is, to your point, and actually this is great, kind of a great issue that way. One of the biggest problems we find dealing with state people is that the state criminal justice agencies are not technology entities. Okay.
Right.
This is important. This is something I learned when I was doing 911 stuff when I first got into the business, is that you got to realize the phone companies were not technology companies. They were technology operators that made revenue off of operating a piece of technology. And, I later on, about 10 years later, realized that's essentially what the state criminal justice agencies are. They are technology operators to deliver criminal justice information to police departments, and that's sheriff's offices. And when you understand that, then it becomes a lot easier to deal with them, because they're never going to look at it from a technologist perspective. They're going to look at it from, how do I enforce law enforcement and criminal justice rules to deliver that system? And once you understand that, it became a lot easier for us. And that's why even those really difficult states, some of those really difficult states, we've actually got good relationships with them because we know how to work with them and they trust us and we're visible. So, gets to the point, you talk about where our disruptive activity is. It's actually in that area, because one of the things that we do differently than really any of the people that we compete with, because there's not really any we directly compete with. There's some people that sell technology to the state systems. They could do a little bit of us, but they don't understand the locals, because in our space, there's local agencies, there's state agencies, and there's federal agencies or national agencies, and they're all different. And you got to understand that each of them has to be sold to differently and worked with differently. But what we've learned from dealing with these agencies over time and these entities is that because they all operate a little differently, we learn we have to start socializing with them. So we go to their meetings and we meet with them, we talk to them. And so one of the things that's happened over time is many of these, what we call a CJIS system officer, it's a CSO, it's a legal term that defines the person that owns the criminal justice system in that particular state. At one time, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I figured it out that I knew 35 of the state CSOs on a first name basis, and about 15
Wow.
of them I knew their predecessors, and 5 of them I knew their predecessor's predecessor,
Wow.
and 10 of those 35 I knew their wives and I knew their kids, and so it tells you how long I've been doing these and visiting and becoming those. So those relationships, and that's the big thing with law enforcement and everything I'm talking about. It's all about relationships. You've got to understand how to relate to people and build relationships with them. And sometimes it's just like being late for our meeting tonight. I was just chatting with one of the agency people I deal with. And quite frankly, I want to tell we were talking business, but we were actually talking family stuff. And those are the relationships you have to have.
Oh, absolutely. And those are the important things, I think, to understand and to have those relationships is key.
Yeah. So with all of that said, what do you see in the future of CommSys?
Yeah, certainly we got a lot of things coming along. You know, one of the things that our business is dominated by is what's called FBI, as in the FBI, CJIS security policy. It's a policy document that's been around in one form or another for about 20 or 30 years. It's a difficult document because where it started and where it needs to be are two different places. It's kind of a combination of policy and technology all kind of wrapped up into one, and it's really been a difficult document to deal with. Now we're rewriting it, and I don't say we in sense of me individually, but the entire community,
Right.
being led by the states and the FBI and locals, and everybody's participating in it because we're trying to align it with like NIST 800-853, which is one of the big issues, big documents for computer security. If some of you people on the phone, on the show, listening to the show, I've heard about this. We're trying to align the CJIS world with the NIST security model, because by getting towards that and working towards that model, we have uniformity, which then means we can also go to the cloud. And that's ultimately what a lot of agencies want to have happen, is be able to put it in the cloud and get away from a lot of on-premise, which most of our businesses right now is still on-premise. I see it being mixed in the future. Some will be cloud, some will be on-premise. But yeah, we got to be able to move seamlessly between the two environments.
And that makes complete sense. I mean, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been enlightening. It's been interesting to kind of look under the hood, kind of what's going on in the States. Because you dial 911, you're like, yeah, somebody's there to answer. Somebody's going to come help me.
Right.
That's all you know.
And you never think anything different.
You never don't think about all of the things that has to happen for that to work right. So this is really interesting and enlightening of what that looks like. With that said, we'd like to ask a question to you, Robert. What do you think of technology in general and the future? What do you see in the future, not just for CommSys, but technology in general all over? What is your prophetic mind saying about the future of tech?
Well, technology going to continue on. I mean, it always has. Nothing will ever change that way, I don't see. I do see that people are going to have to get more understanding about what some of the technologies are. I mean, AI is obviously one of those areas where there's a lot of excitement in terms of things, but there's going to be limitations to what it can do and what it can't do, but also how it can be misused. And I think people have to get a lot more aware of how large corporations who are trying to serve their investors are going to sometimes do things that may not make sense. So you've got to pay attention and be active about saying, no, we don't think that's a good use of technology. And I'm not saying what that is, but I'm just saying I want people to pay attention, because because of where it comes from with public safety and law enforcement, you've got to deal with the fact that there's both policy and technology. And so I'm more aware of it than most people are, but you've always got to be looking at how does the policy contain technology, because technology affects our lives. Policy should be controlling technology, not the other way around.
Agreed.
Oh, good.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Good insight. Absolutely. Cool. Well, Robert, thank you so much. Brad, any last words with what are we thinking? Man,
No, I
this
mean,
was really
my-
enlightening. Very
My brain
cool
is just
stuff.
on overload right now. I'm
Oh,
trying
I
to
could
process it all.
tell
I
you.
know.
You want me back? I can tell you about all the things. Next Gen 911, ASAP, PSAP, all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's all things in my space. There's just all sorts of neat things to talk about. So if you ever need
Absolutely.
something to talk about, you want me to ramble on endlessly.
Absolutely. I mean, I think
I
that's
love
definitely
it.
something that we'll keep in our back pocket if
Absolutely.
we ever want to have you on again, and love to chat more and in depth and understand those things a little bit more.
So how do people find out more about CommSys, or can they connect it,
Well,
especially if they're looking for
fortunately,
jobs? Or
because I've been involved with the internet since almost day one, we have our own domain. www.commsys.com. That's COMMSYS.com. Charlie Oscar Mike Sierra Yankee Sierra.com. The actual legitimate one. We've had that for about 30 years, and that's probably the best place to go, and you'll see a lot about us that way. And if you're interested in looking at us for a job, we are on LinkedIn. That's probably a good place to connect. That's probably the only social media we really do, which in our space that makes sense. But
Absolutely.
if you want to send us a resume or something like that, you can send it to resume@comsys.com. But please send us PDFs. It's a lot safer that way. Just as
Agreed.
yeah.
Right.
awesome.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you so much, Robert. This was super
This
cool,
was very
super
enlightening. Yeah,
I love
I love
it. Thank you for spending the time with us, Robert, and thank you for what you're doing, because that's
Well,
powerful stuff. I love
Absolutely.
it. Your
Well,
passion.
I appreciate the time. I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Awesome. Well, you know what time it is. It's time to go. Thank you for listening to Jobs in Tech. We'll see you next time.